Morning, guys. Today, we're talking about this shit. Absolute banger. Let's talk about this, okay? I love the fact that G2 are actually doing something super interesting with their drafts here. A lot of things that just, they have a very good confident style in terms of, they know what they like and they know what they think is good, and it's proven, and they're playing to their team's strengths. And I think that's like super lit, right? So that's why I wanted to break over this draft in particular, because I think G2 were not actually ready for this. They were, but like not truly, if that makes sense, right? They had an inkling, but it didn't really seem that NRG was given the respect they deserve, and G2 really punished them for it. So that's why I really like this draft, and we're gonna pop into it real quick. So let's start with game one, where if you notice off the bat, boom, Draven and Kalista are both gone here, right? And that's pretty reasonable for someone like Hansama. You gotta give him the respect that he deserves. And NRG are super aware of that. Totally fine, right? Xayah ban, very normal, I would say. Normal for this meta, because teams just don't want to trade the two picks, and they don't want to deal with both of them together. Same with Orianna. It's not anything special, I would say, in terms of like what the ban really entails. So let's get to the interesting part, right? B1 Nico. It's not like completely out of the ordinary, but the fact that they're focusing their resources on, I wouldn't say it's like an amazing champion to open with, right? It's definitely a good champion, but it's not the first champion you think of when you think of opening your draft. So it's not necessarily about a lot of these priority picks. It's more, and what NRG is going for is just a focus on the ability to hedge their cards and not really show anything at first. So I would say Nico generally does that, with the exception of having not the longest range in the world, right? See Kai Sorel, pretty normal stuff. And then they blind top 2. And you're like, huh, that's a little bit weird, right? Because no team would pick AD second phase at this stage in Worlds, right? Based on what the meta we're seeing, we're just seeing Kai'Sa Xayah trades out the window, maybe a couple of other things. But there's so many ADCs banned, and this is the draft that kind of NRG have signed up for, right? They literally banned 3 AD carries, which is really funny. But this is basically a cook in terms of what they were going for, because they pick Vi on B2, B3, because they basically know that G2 is going to take Kai'Sa here, because there's 4 ADCs banned, they took a 5th one, right? So the draft is actually quote-unquote going in their favor, per se. So at this point, it's pretty obvious what G2 want to do, right? They just want to go forward, and they have Syndra to back it up. Jungle is not very flexible. It's just going to be some CC facilitator, and then they're going to pick someone that's going to take advantage of K'Sante top while going forward, right? So, because of this, NRG's bans are basically going to force themselves against this. The Olaf ban is super funny because there's not a lot. It's a really good matchup for Olaf, actually, but there's like no people that actually do it. So this is clearly some like insider information or something from scrims that led NRG to be like, yeah, we gotta let Dokla live here, right? Viego ban comes out. It's probably just like a stylistic choice of what they think Yike is going to do the best on against the Vi, and really just take the game out of control. Other things would have been also fine. Like, I'm sure things like Lee Sin are still okay. Jarvan's still up. Like, a lot of the field is still available. I'm not really too concerned about the jungle pool itself. And our G2, obviously, see both mid and top, so they're just going to counter pick top on 4 because it just seems the most obvious. It's not normal to counter pick jungle on 5, but they don't really have a reason to not do so, I guess. So that's why they feel obligated to pick Jax here. And this is where it gets funny, bro. The Senna-Tahm comes out. This is a throwback right here. But this exemplifies exactly what I think teams should be focusing more on in draft right now. Because if you think about it in a vacuum, if you think about what these 2 champions do against what these 5 champions do, even like forget the laning phase, even like Senna-Tahm is known for the uninitiated. Senna-Tahm is known for absolutely preventing and like diluting every single lane and just not letting it do anything, right? Just forcing the laning phase to be about nothing and just pretty much skipping it to 15 minutes, at least from a bot side perspective, right? Because you have range advantage, you have sustain advantage, you have like TK has the stats to kind of just prevent all lanes from really doing much, because you kind of get stat checked and then you kind of get out sustained. The only thing it's lacking is damage. It's a lower DPS than normal, but it's really not a bad thing. And Senna also got buffed in this patch, I believe, which with the crit boost to her autos, so there's no crit penalty for her anymore. So that's why she has a little bit more damage than before. What's cool about this though is that this is basically pushing against the norm, because I don't think I mean, if you look at the pick rate, there's literally no other team that would do this. It's specifically an NRG thing to do. And it's super cool because it actually shitstomps lane, right? And if you think about it, they actually planned the rest of their draft around this. So they banned out 80 carries that potentially could give problems to a lane like this, in spite of them blinding it, right? Let's say they blind a different 80 carry here, I'm sure there's a chance that actually Senna-Tahm would have another issue regardless. So that's where this logic kind of like wraps around. And look at this. Nico is considered a defensive backwards mage. She can be forwards, but like she's excelling at creating space with her abilities as well. Cassante, perfect for peeling this off, right? The Vi is more of like a stylistic thing, I guess, against the you kind of lock down that Kaisa, which is like, okay, you know, it makes sense. But the main point here is that it is very, very hard for G2 to actually do much against this. But this is something that's completely off meta. So that's why it's like super interesting. And I think I encourage teams to get really creative with draft. It's not like G2 is a bad team, right? I don't think the issue is quote unquote related to gameplay, because G2 is a fantastic team, as we can all probably tell, right? But the interesting thing about draft is that it kind of establishes the room and what you're playing for both of these teams. And the room here for G2 is not much, right? As you can tell in lane, good suggestion I got someone from the comments suggesting to talk about the in-game implications, so thank you very much for that. And look at this example, right? They're just chilling in lane. They go for a big engage, high commitment. And look at this, Senna-Tahm doing this thing, completely preventing and allowing FBI to just disjoint their engage. And look, G2 burned 2 TPs. Let's check their wave states, right? They burned 2 TPs. I guess waves are fine, but like the amount of resources that they go for here on a negative output play is kind of crazy. And again, they try hard. I guess they get it here, right? You'll give them a bone here and there, but like it's so hard for them to really do anything, because it's just after a certain point, they're not going to really be able to reach and do much to the FBI. So the fact that this comp is low damage is not really a big issue, right? And they just slowly choke out and die, because look, this bot lane is 07. I expect it to be 07 with the way that this has been set up, right? So I really, really applaud them here. Game 2, immediately, G2 absolutely nuke the Senna, right? It's gone. They just don't want to deal with it. They pick blue. They think blue is good on this patch because there's a lot of good B1s, right? They banned Orion on blue as well, which is super interesting because they probably just don't want to play it ever, which is in a way kind of a weakness, right? Xayah Rakan chain is open this time, which they are down for in this draft instead. So very standard. It's not something we're used to from G2, who is historically super creative, I would say. Similar bans, I would say, from NRG, except with the Viego, since they believe they just have an extra. NRG are clearly down for the Xayah Rakan dynamic. Then this could be because they have a plan for it. And at this point, I would expect a lot of teams to have plans with like the different chains with the Xayah Rakan trades. So this is a very classic one. They beat one Xayah, right? A lot of teams think Xayah is the better one because of her unique stance as an AD carry that has peel, right? People think it's very valuable, and it is, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be drafted around and be countered, right? So we see the Rakan being taken, we see Jarvan being taken. And I think within the current realm of supports, this is actually, we're taking Rakan is still the better out of the two, but people have their own opinions on that, and G2 are one of them. So this is actually a pretty, like, for considering it's a Xayah Rakan chain, it's a pretty decent attempt at countering both chains, right? You see Xayah B1. This is how drafts should generally function. Xayah B1, they break it up, they counter Xayah with Jarvan. Jarvan, by the way, counters Xayah because he has engaged that is non-CC, so Xayah is still stuck and he does his job regardless. G2 attempt to counter the Jarvan with Poppy, Azir. Azir is not really a counter, it's more so just to contribute to the composition, which is chill. But the main thing we're pointing out here is that as each team is getting information, they're continuing to counter. Then this is the first mismatch of the draft where they just pick Rumble on 3. Because, I mean, Azir is just a generic champion in that sense. You could pick things like traditional picks are like Akali and Yone from like last year, but like that's not something that's going to be picked. So they decide to just leave it for now, right? It doesn't make sense to pick it against a comp that's full defensive, right? The full identity of the draft is just a impenetrable meatball. Impenetrable fortress, right? But they are limited to the range of Xayah and Azir, which is, all things considered, not insanely high. This time, G2 are the ones that are kind of playing defensive. And NRG kind of catch on to this. They ban out defensive picks. Things that could prevent this Rumble from shining, right? So K'Sante and Jax are the bans. And what's interesting about this is that they pick Taliyah Rumble. And why is this a good thing, right? It's good because it enables NRG to basically play the map however they want for the first few minutes. Like, G2 is such a creative team. And this is the other aspect of draft that I always like talking about in terms of forcing the playstyle of the game in your favor. That is something you trade for in draft as well. It's like when you force a team like G2 to go Xayah, Poppy, Azir, to be honest, that's kind of good for a team like you, right? If your team is like not as creative or they just can't match, if you force G2 onto a composition that may be good, but doesn't have the room to be creative, it's kind of a good thing, right? Because now NRG are the ones with the reins. They can cause chaos. Sometimes against certain teams, this is not a good draft, right? But look again, R5 AD carry, bro. I'm loving this shit. There's so many good ADs right now, by the way. Like, it's kind of crazy how there's only Xayah Kaisa being picked like 9 times out of 10. Because there's so many champions that can deal with this, and I think I encourage teams to really get a little more creative like NRG does. AD carry has the most flexibility out of any role right now. Support is just facilitators. There's no enchanters that are good, right? Except maybe Renata or like Rakan, you know? Jungle, all facilitators, right? Top is basically bruisers, tanks, and Rumble, which is some variance, right? It's not too bad, but it's still the same type of top laner. AD carry is where your dynamic changes significantly, right? You have differences in range, differences in laning dynamics. You can have the hardest counter picks there. You have a lot of options. It's more than what you think, guys. Look, no one plays Sivir. Why is this allowed? That's not Kai'Sa. Why did we lose, guys? Why? Well, it's just that NRG are not afraid to experiment, right? It's a very high chaos, actually decent comp that's suppressing this Xayah Nautilus. And they have so much room. They have for all intents and purposes, for the first 15 minutes, they have 3 winning lanes, right? Sure, Xayah Nautilus is still hard to deal with, but you have a lane that basically neutralizes this, right? Rakan can go do whatever the hell he wants. Xayah Nautilus feels like he has to kill, but Sivir is just gonna nuke the wave, tank the hook with spell shield, and you're chilling. And then Rakan can go help the rest of the map. And this is why the scaling isn't even relevant here with G2. Right? So let's go to game 2. Ooh, no, that's not the clip I'm looking for. That's Palette. He's getting Palette Blaster there. But let's look at some examples here, and let me look for some. Look how chaotic this is, right? They're forcing plays on top side of the map. G2 can do this, but their champs are not really designed to do this at like 14 minutes in the game, right? NRG are super happy taking these trades and just forcing this stuff. They're trying to go in with a comp that's kind of like a meatball, just front to back comp. And that's not how G2 likes to play. And meanwhile, this game is pretty much on NRG's terms because they have the champions that's set up for the comp they're looking for. And it doesn't matter. It could be that G2, you know, like if the draft was, let's say, on even terms, G2 could have easily won this series. But because NRG are willing to set themselves up in draft and they know what they think is good, they actually just they cheat a win here, right? And I think it's super nice. So that's the lesson from today. Be flexible in draft. Late pick AD carry, guys. I think there's so many options for teams that I think we still haven't hit the limit of what drafts can be in this world. And I want to see more of this. I want to see teams to challenge this norm. So thanks, guys. I'll catch you in the next.